For many centuries, Britain was a dangerous place.
It was a magnet for the very worst kind of people. Jack the Ripper dominated the headlines, but he wasn't the only killer around. Murder was afoot. The fear of death was everywhere.
But police had their work cut out to track the culprits down. In this series, we'll be investigating some of the country's most notorious and intriguing crimes.
Female defendant.
Sexual intrigue, vicious murder, as well as the latest technology, fed the nation's insatiable desire
For gruesome stories of Britain's dark side. In the late summer and autumn of 1966, Harry Roberts was the most wanted man in England. He had murdered his 3 victims on a suburban London street in broad daylight. The manhunt to find him was one of the largest in British history. His vicious crime shook the nation. England was celebrating an historic victory in the World Cup. But away from the football field, the country was troubled. Reforming Home Secretary Roy Jenkins hoped to build what he called a civilized society. Homosexuality was decriminalized, censorship of the theatre ended, abortion laws liberalized, and the death penalty was suspended. Its removal from the British justice system caused outcry, not least because many thought the country in the grip of a crime epidemic. The Moors murders had hit the news just the previous year. The crimes of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley plumbed horrifying new depths of cruelty.
After decades of falling crime, when people felt that they could leave their back doors open, communities began to feel more afraid. They began to feel that crime was perhaps more anonymous.
You've had the Crays in the East End and the Richardsons in the south of London. So there was a kind of gang culture.
It became very noticeable that more crimes were being committed with guns. Before that, when you saw on the films, television, you read about it. The criminals were using iron bars, they were using pickaxe handles. But few were using guns because there was the threat of capital punishment hanging over them. But once that had been lifted, more and more criminals, it seemed, were carrying guns. That was the public perception.
Of police and relatives was held a funeral service of the 3 men who were shot dead, callously murdered, barely a mile.
Jack says he didn't turn up.
They were protecting the public in the execution of...
Where have you been?
That stark official phrase.
I asked my boss for a favour to get you that interview.
Men and women, CID men.
Did it even cross your mind how that makes me look?
I wasn't feeling well.
Fueled by the slump in the economy, unemployment was an affliction which affected everyone in all parts of the country, a factor which boosted the rate of crime. Amid this breakdown of law and order, this fraying of the social fabric, Harry Roberts' crimes struck a nerve. For his 3 victims were policemen. Geoffrey Fox was 41, Christopher Head, 30, and David Wombwell, just 25. They were colleagues at the Shepherd's Bush police station in West London.
Jeff Fox was one of the characters of the police station. He'd served all his police service there, so he knew everybody. A walking computer, he recognised all the criminals, and he was a local man. Chris Head, he was from Devon. I didn't know him so well because he'd only recently come over from Hammersmith, but a very nice guy. Dave Woolmore was a much younger man, and he was also a temporary detective, so he'd been selected for that. A very smart, personable, really nice young man.
On the morning of August the 12th, 1966, the 3 men reported for their shift as normal. Fox was the driver, Head kept watch for anything suspicious, and Wombwell was the operator responsible for the car's log and radio. Shortly after 3 p.m, they spotted something. A shabby, standard Vanguard estate. Its paint was scuffed. Its exhaust pipe hung loose. Inside were 3 men. Why the policemen decided to follow Harry Roberts and his crew is unknown. Perhaps the rundown car caught their eye. Perhaps they recognized one of the men inside. Or perhaps it was just an instinct for trouble. A few hundred feet away from Braybrook Street lies Wormwood Scrubs Prison.
Sort of place there that sometimes on the outskirts or perimeter of prisons, sometimes criminals do get up to tricks.
Frequently escapes were attempted from the prison by persons waiting outside in getaway cars. Head had been told that there had been some sort of suspicious behaviour in the area.
If I put my police hat on, I would say that location, they're by the prison. Scruffy old standard Vanguard vehicle. 3 men, 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a sunny summer's afternoon. It's a suspicious scenario.
The Vanguard turned into Braybrook Street. It was a residential area. Council houses lined one side of the street. Children played in the park opposite. The police car accelerated, pulling alongside the Vanguard. Detective Sergeant Head wound down his window and signalled the driver to pull over. The Vanguard stopped outside number 57. Within minutes, the peaceful, warm haze of that summer afternoon would be punctured by gunfire.
She, though greatly distressed, broadcast this appeal.
I ask you from the bottom of my heart to come into the open and give yourself up.
Hello?
If you make an appointment with me, I will come with you. Please do as I ask you, before there's any more bloodshed.
Somebody there?
What do you want?
I heard the radio. I didn't touch nothing. I didn't know somebody lived here. I live in the village, in Thorley.
I'm not look familiar to you.
I don't meet many people. It's just me and my mum really, and well, she ain't around all that much, so...
You don't read newspapers?
No.
Not even look at them?
I ain't lying. I can't.
Can't what?
Read newspapers, or anything. I can't read.
Well, you ain't missing much. What's your name?
Paul.
Roberts was born in Wanstead, Essex in 1936. It was here he spent the formative years of his life. His parents ran a pub called the George. At the age of 5, he was separated from his mother and father. During the war, with the Blitz take its toll, Roberts was relocated for his own safety to a small Monmouthshire village where he lived with a miner's family. His mother would visit every fortnight, but he would never see his father again. He seemed to excel in the local school, gaining good reports. After the war, he relocated back to London, where he attended a Roman Catholic boarding school in the south of the city. He was soon playing truant and stealing. Aged 14, he was expelled. When he then assaulted and robbed a shopkeeper, the course of his life seemed set. But in 1956, the 19-year-old Roberts was thrown an unlikely-seeming lifeline. He was called up for national service. He joined the British Army and was deployed in Kenya and Malaya.
He'd gone into the army, joined the Rifle Brigade, seen service in Malaya, and was a marksman.
He'd gone out to Kenya in the Mau Mau uprising and in Malaya, and had a certain amount of training and skill in sleeping rough.
He boasted that he had proved himself such a good shot that he had actually shot communist insurgents out there.
Later, he would boast of reaching the rank of sergeant. In fact, he never made it past corporal. But he was a good soldier, well liked by his superiors. When he was discharged after 2 years, he left with a glowing testimonial. He was unable to transfer that success to civilian life. Despite settling down with a wife, Robert soon fell back into old habits.
His wife undoubtedly had an idea that he wasn't completely straight and honest, that he had a criminal record.
I understand from his antecedents that he was a violent man anyway, an intimidating man.
He bounced between periods of employment. He couldn't seem to convince himself to keep on the straight and narrow. So he'd take delivery jobs and little bits here and there would go missing.
In 1959, he almost killed an elderly man during a robbery. His wife reported him. Roberts was sentenced to 7 years in prison. His marriage didn't survive. Once again, however, the world gave Roberts another chance. Prison life suited him. The order, the routine. It was almost like the army. And Roberts became a model prisoner. He took a bricklaying course and excelled. After less than 5 years in jail, he was released. He went into the building trade. It seemed he'd turned his life around. He started his own business in Bristol. For a time, it prospered. But his inexperience showed when the British economy slowed and the work dried up. In March 1966, Roberts abandoned Bristol and his business and the debts he had rapidly built up there.
You're a good fella. A smashing fella.
Whole cupboard of it me dad left. Mum don't drink it, so...
I bet you snuck a cheeky glass or two, though, didn't you, when she's not looking?
Maybe.
Well, come on, then. Let's do the water test. I know that trick. Cheers.
Cheers. So, what are you doing out here?
I'm a bit of a character, let's say, back in London. I'm known.
What for?
Cars, mostly. Bit of a past master at it. Thing is, the heat's getting a bit much. I've been embarrassing the coppers.
That's why you're hiding?
Laying low. So where's your old man at?
He left. Could be dead, as far as I care. I don't miss him.
I was 5 when mine left.
You didn't know your dad?
Got called up in the war. Never came back.
Was he killed?
No. He just never came back.
Don't know what my dad did in the war. Probably nothing.
I was in the army, you know.
Really?
Rifle Brigade in Malaya. The jungle. Shot some commies. Cheers.
Cheers.
At 8:30 in the morning, on Friday the 12th of August 1966, Harry Roberts left his home in Maida Vale and made his way 1.5 miles to Ladbroke Grove. Waiting for him there were 37-year-old Glaswegian John Duddy and 36-year-old Londoner Jack Whitney. Whitney was a known petty criminal with a string of convictions for theft. Duddy, on the other hand, had been in trouble with the law in his youth, but had been going straight for around 18 years. Running up to that day, though, he was drinking heavily and had met Whitney and Roberts in one of London's late-night clubs. The three men climbed into Whitney's decrepit Vanguard and set off. Their plan was to steal a car. They cruised the streets of West London searching for the right one.
They'd already got the false plates for the car if they could pick one up. They were planning to do a robbery on possibly a business or a rent collector, but that was the intention.
Harry Roberts was wearing a suit because they were going to hijack a commuter car. It would have looked better to have somebody dressed in a suit driving that kind of car.
The Vanguard was driven by Whitney. Roberts was the passenger in the front, and Duddy was in the back.
The day was a hot one. Inside the Vanguard, it was hotter still. After an unsuccessful morning, all three men were glad to stop for lunch at the Clay Pigeon pub in Eastcote. They doused their frustration with pints of bitter before clambering back into the boiling car. They drove east this time towards central London. Shortly after 3 p.m, they turned into Braybrook Street in Shepherd's Bush. And there, they were intercepted by the unmarked police car. Police soon descended on the scene from all over London. It was pure luck that the killers avoided them. They locked up the Vanguard in a railway arch and wondered what on earth they were going to do. Braybrook Street had been transformed into a scene of horror. And no sooner had the police arrived, so did the public, trying to catch a glimpse of what was going on, eager to understand what kind of incident could warrant such attention. Forensic teams followed. Prints, blood samples, photographs were all taken. Witnesses gave statements, and the bodies of the 3 policemen were covered and eventually removed. As word began to spread, there was tangible shock within the policing community. All resources were used in the hunt for the culprits. Police investigating the murders had a vital early clue. An attentive witness had noted down the number plate of the car speeding away from the scene, PGT 726. Police began searching for the owner.
At the time, there was no police national computer. They had to go to County Hall.
This was absolutely at the worst time of the week for anything like this to happen. It's late afternoon on a Friday, the weekend's coming up.
It was out of hours, so they had to get somebody in to open up the records to find out the registered keeper of the Standard Vanguard.
The official register was not up to date, so the vehicle had to be tracked sale by sale, owner to owner. And that trail ended at the ground floor flat of Jack Whitney. Just 6 hours had passed since the shooting when Whitney was taken in for questioning. He lied at first, telling police he'd sold the car that Friday and he had nothing to do with the killings. But police quickly found holes in his alibi. As the gravity of his situation sank in, Whitney changed course. He told them what had really happened, and he gave them the names of his accomplices.
Whitney fairly well decided he was in for it. He was not going to be able to get out of this, and above all, his best way forward was to confess and to implicate his accomplices, insisting all the time that he had been the driver, only the driver, that he had had no knowledge of Harry Roberts' intention, was taken by surprise.
He gave evidence against the other two on the basis that his role hadn't been quite so serious.
John Duddy was arrested next. In the days after the shooting, he'd headed north for his native Glasgow. But as news of his involvement spread, he was betrayed to the police and arrested. By Wednesday, the 17th of August, 2 of the 3 men wanted in connection with the massacre in Shepherd's Bush had been found. But the 3rd man had vanished.
All right, you're in the paper again. I nabbed it.
Anyone talking about it?
Nah. What's it say?
Nothing new. You know, I reckon you could read if you put your mind to it.
I ain't got the brains for it.
No one else has found me here, have they? Do you know what a copper would call you and me?
What?
Co-conspirators.
What's that?
Well, it's like you just told me you nicked that paper. I'm handling stolen goods, so they're doing me for it. Doesn't matter how many times I said, nah, it's not me that did the stealing. It makes no odds to them. That's why you should never help a copper. They'll offer you all sorts. Help with this, help with that. Cash even. But you talk to them even once, you'll be digging a hole for yourself. You know how you can tell if a copper's lying?
How?
His lips are moving.
Really?
It's a Nazi gun, that, you know.
Yeah?
Want to have a go? You know what? I think you got it in you, kid.
Yeah?
Nearly as good as me. How you fancy making some cash? Is this timber yard over at Sawbridgeworth?
Timber, like wood?
Yeah. I checked it out the other night. They've got these machines. You can get coffee and chocolate from them, yeah? You know what I mean? I used to work in places like that. They don't empty them for ages. You just pop the lock, and out comes the cash. They might as well give it away.
I should be getting back. Me mum will be getting off her shift soon.
Right. Don't want to upset Mommy, do we?
In their guards or something?
No. There's a fella pops his head round every hour or so, but we'll be long gone by then. It'll be fun, I promise.
After the murders of the 3 policemen on Braybrook Street, detectives had wasted no time in the hunt for the killers. The standard vanguard used in the shooting had been found, which led to the arrest of Jack Whitney. John Duddy was the next to be arrested. But the third man, Harry Roberts, remained elusive. The biggest manhunt in police history was underway. Finding out that he'd caught a bus to Epping Forest in North London, equipped with a loaded rucksack on the Sunday after the shooting, officers searched through 6,000 acres of dense woodland. But there was no sign of him.
Harry Roberts has no intention of being taken, and he starts off what has gone down as the longest manhunt in English policing history.
He decided to live rough, to buy some equipment and take to the land, because he was used to living rough, having been in Malaya in the army.
His plan is to lie low long enough for people to, he believes, stop looking for him, give up. Then he'll emerge, try to change his appearance, try to escape.
He was seen here, there and everywhere. He was seen on planes, he was seen on boats, all over the place. But this is what normally happens when the police get flooded with information.
Obviously every lead was followed up, and of course probably the underworld were a bit frustrated as well, because they would have been turned over a lot by the police, seeking information.
The first few days, of course, the media attention was very intense. And then, of course, the arrests followed and the developments followed. And then over nearly 3 months, that same media coverage couldn't be maintained.
It did go quiet for a long time, but that doesn't mean that you stop.
Whether it was necessity or greed which made Roberts decide to break into a nearby factory was unknown. But he had managed to convince a local young man from the area to assist him.
How much do you get away with them? Shame your friend lost you in the dark there. Especially as he was the one carrying all the money. What are you? 18? 19? Have you had something to eat?
I ain't hungry.
Where's he hiding?
I don't know anything.
You have no idea who you've been hanging around with, do you? Three police officers were murdered in cold blood. Your friend was the one who pulled the trigger. He shot one of them right through the eyeball.
Just leave me alone.
Roberts had a choice when you fell. He left you. You've got a choice now. So take us to him.
Roberts escaped discovery that night, but his luck was running out. Local police investigating the break-in at the factory tracked their suspect to Thorley Wood, but it was Roberts' accomplice who told them about the camp. After further searches, they soon tracked it down. Its occupant had vanished once again. Police surrounded Thorley village, desperate to ensure Roberts would not slip the net, and there would be no escape this time.
It was a hay barn where they found him, dishevelled and hungry. After 96 days, police finally had their man.
He was in a sleeping bag in a barn, and he'd got the Luger with him that he'd used in the crime. And he just said, I'll come quietly.
It's not very glamorous. It's not shootout. It's not being captured, resisting arrest in a blaze of glory.
I was elated. I was very, very pleased.
Trial proceedings had started for Jack Whitney and John Duddy, but this was adjourned once the police had found Roberts. The three men could now be tried together. This was in the best interest of the prosecution, as their charges of murder were weak against Whitney and Duddy. Whitney had never fired a shot, and Duddy had only killed one. But with Roberts in the mix, a whole story could be put together of the three men going out on that hot August day with a common purpose. Their trial began at the Old Bailey on the 12th of December 1966.
John Whitney didn't actually pull the trigger, but he went out planning a robbery where he knew firearms were going to be used, and he knew that somebody might get shot and might get killed as a result.
He didn't do anything to stop them. He could have driven off, but he didn't. He waited and took the other two that had done the shooting, and off they all three went together, so he was totally implicated.
What is very plain is that while he is remorseful, more than anything else, he's remorseful about being caught. If he could have got away with it, he would have got away with it.
They were found guilty, but their sentence of life in prison reignited the debate over capital punishment.
The public favoured capital punishment, no doubt quite glad to have seen the three of them go to the gallows.
Murdering Head, Wombwell and Fox was understood by the police as well as the wider community as being deeply shocking. It shouldn't happen.
Had the timing of these things been different, well, probably no doubt that all three of them would have been executed.
Had the Home Secretary wavered even a little, there could have been a revisiting. But he doesn't. He supported by his fellow MPs, sticks to what they believe is a sound moral principle.
Despite public outrage, the death penalty was never reinstated in Britain. The three men were sent to separate prisons. John Duddy died in Parkhurst Prison on the Isle of Wight in 1981. Jack Whitney was released 10 years later, but he himself was brutally murdered by a heroin addict in 1998. Harry Roberts was in jail for almost 50 years, becoming one of Britain's longest-serving prisoners. In 2014, however, he was controversially released at the age of 78. He never expressed any remorse for his crimes.
Police were extremely critical of this decision to release him, and much of the public would agree with that decision.
Generally, people thought that he had learned nothing. He wasn't in any way a different man. Every year, 3 or 4 of us had always drunk to the memory of the lads on the 12th of August. It's always been with me.
It had a huge impact on the police. They have never forgotten, never forgiven.
Good luck.
The deaths of Geoffrey Fox, Christopher Head, and David Wombwell prompted a flood of donations. The money raised led to the creation of the Police Dependents Trust, a charity that supports the families of officers killed or injured on duty. Their work continues to this very day.